Hello everyone, I'm Spartan Robot Guy, and this is episode 1 of Unsung Heroes. Today we're going to be talking about the American Civil War, and more specifically, the Battle of Gettysburg. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into the details about Gettysburg, just because I feel that it's widely known to the point where it's not absolutely necessary. Most people at least touched upon it in a basic high school history curriculum. There's a bunch of really good documentaries, there's some fantastic books, there's even a very good film adaptation of Gettysburg, so it's well known enough that that won't be necessary. Now, something that's interesting about the Battle of Gettysburg is that there's a whole bevy of unsung heroes worth discussing. There's John Byrne, there is the 1st Minnesota, and there's a whole bunch of other ones worth talking about. But today's hero is interesting in that she showed that heroes don't have to wear capes. Not only that, heroes don't even have to walk upright to be heroes. Today's hero is Sallie the dog, or as her full name, Sallie Anne Jarrett. Okay, so who was Sallie the dog? Sallie was a bull terrier, first of all, get the obvious out of the way, and she was the unofficial mascot of the 11th Pennsylvania Infantry Unit. By all accounts, she was not only a very well-behaved dog, but she was also a very courageous dog. During active combat, she wouldn't necessarily go out and say, start mauling rebels, but what she would do is she would run around the battlefield and fetch bullets that apparently had been fired at her unit that had missed and bring them back to their commander, just to keep their spirits up, to keep them fighting. As if that wasn't cool enough, there is a story that falls more under the category of legend than actual fact. I freely admit that, because it's never been properly corroborated. But there is a story that Abraham Lincoln himself reviewed the 11th Pennsylvania. And when he did, he gave a glowing endorsement of having Sallie as a mascot. And speaking specifically of Sallie, he had this to say. She was of medium size, squarely and handsomely built. Her coat soft and silky, chest broad and deep, her head and ears small, and her eyes a bright hazel, full of fire and intelligence. Her knowledge of the individual members of the regiment was truly wonderful, and one was at a loss to know how she acquired it. A whole corps might pass her, but she could make no mistake about her own regiment, and never followed any other. Now, as incredible as these stories are, Sallie wouldn't become a true hero until the Battle of Gettysburg. Now, to put it lightly, the first day of the battle was not a good day for Union forces. They were severely routed outside of town and were forced to retreat all the way through the town and up to Cemetery Ridge, which is where they would set up their primary defenses for the second and third day of the battle. The 11th Pennsylvania was one of the first infantry units to engage the Confederates on the first day, at what's now called Oak Ridge. They certainly fought as best as they could, but in the end they were routed and they were forced to retreat along with the rest of the Union forces. However, in the chaos of the retreat, Sallie was separated from her unit and by all accounts was likely lost for a little while, but instead of trying to cross through the town and reconnect with them, she went back to the wounded and she guarded the men in her unit that were on the ground bleeding out. Now, what exactly it means to be a hero is hard to ascertain. But for 3 days, Sallie refused to leave their side. She stayed with the wounded. She licked at their injuries, doing anything she could to keep their spirits up. She growled at anybody that came too close. She defended them in the only way she knew how. And for 3 long days, she just guarded those wounded soldiers. When reinforcements finally did show up, she was severely dehydrated. She hadn't eaten in 3 days. She was sleep deprived. She was absolutely miserable. But she was still refusing to leave those wounded soldiers behind. Frankly, if that's not true heroism, I don't know what is. So, what happened to Sallie the dog? Well, she survived the Battle of Gettysburg, needless to say. However, on February 5th, 1865, just a few months before the war's end actually, her unit was engaged in a small, relatively unknown skirmish known today as Hatcher's Run, and she was clipped by a stray bullet and was killed instantly. She was buried there the same day as the battle and still lies there to this very day. According to legend, the night before the battle, she was crying all through the night, and nobody in the unit was able to console her, was able to make her feel better. So perhaps she knew. Dogs seem to have that sixth sense, but I guess we'll never know. Now, a parting thought about Sallie the dog. You know, stories like this are always interesting because it's sometimes difficult to discern what is fact and what is legend. But there's one thing we can all say for certain about Sallie the dog. She was the absolute goodest of girls. And with that, I will leave you all to ponder. Hasta luego, mis amis.